Let me tell you a story that will challenge everything you think you know about betrayal, resilience, and what it truly means to get the last laugh. Imagine this: a grand ballroom, chandeliers shimmering like frozen tears, hundreds of eyes fixed on a scene straight out of a nightmare. A woman, 7 months pregnant, her heart a raw, throbbing wound in her chest, watches as her billionaire husband, the man who vowed to spend forever with her, drops to one knee. But not for her, for another woman. His secretary, in front of everyone. This isn't just a tale of infidelity. It's a deep dive into the darkest corners of corporate greed, personal betrayal, and the astonishing power of a woman pushed to her absolute limit. It's about how sometimes the end of one story is truly the explosive beginning of another, far more compelling one. And I promise you, by the time this story concludes, you'll not only be rooting for our protagonist, Victoria, but you'll also have a radically different perspective on how we define success, failure, and the true measure of a person's worth. So, lean in, because this isn't just a story. It's a masterclass in turning humiliation into ultimate victory. The air in the grand ballroom of the Maxwell estate felt thick, suffocating, yet oddly charged, as if anticipation itself had taken physical form. For Victoria, however, it was a prelude to an agony she could never have foreseen. She stood there, a silent statue of emerald silk, her 7-month pregnant belly a tender secret beneath the flowing fabric. Every crystal chandelier, every glimmer of reflected light seemed to mock her, spinning in a dizzying ballet that mirrored the chaos already brewing inside her. And then, the unspeakable happened. Alexander Maxwell, her husband of 5 years, a man whose name was synonymous with power and immense wealth, the father of the child growing within her, dropped to one knee. The collective gasp that swept through the 200 guests was almost audible, a ripple of shock that vibrated through the very foundations of the opulent room. Champagne glasses, suspended mid-air, seemed to hold their breath alongside her. Victoria's hands, hidden by her sides, began to tremble uncontrollably, a tremor that resonated deep within her. It was then, amidst the deafening silence that followed the gasp, that she felt it, a soft, insistent flutter, a tiny kick from her unborn child. It was as if Lily, even in her prenatal slumber, sensed the horror unfolding, a silent protest against the cruel theater her father was orchestrating. Alexander had insisted she attend this business gala, a non-negotiable command despite her persistent morning sickness and overwhelming fatigue. He'd spun a plausible tale about needing her presence to avoid fueling rumors, a demand that, in retrospect, was a meticulously crafted lie designed to ensure her public humiliation was complete. This wasn't a spontaneous act of passion. This was a calculated, cold-blooded execution of a public betrayal. Then, Alexander's voice, amplified by the ballroom's acoustics, boomed through the space, devoid of any warmth, any tremor of emotion. "Cassandra, you've been the love of my life for the past 2 years," he declared, his words echoing off the polished marble floors, each syllable a shard of glass piercing Victoria's heart. "Victoria and I have a business arrangement, nothing more. You're the woman I want to spend forever with." The casual cruelty of his dismissal, the reduction of 5 years of shared life, dreams, and effort to a mere business arrangement, was breathtaking in its audacity. Victoria's eyes, burning with unshed tears, locked with Alexander's. She searched for a flicker of remorse, a hint of hesitation, any sign of the man she had once loved, the man who had promised her a future. But there was nothing, only a cold, hard satisfaction, a cruel glint in his eyes as he slipped a massive diamond ring onto Cassandra's outstretched finger. It was a gesture of triumph, a public declaration of ownership, and Victoria was merely a prop in his grandiose display. Cassandra, meanwhile, let out a delighted squeal, her arms flying around Alexander's neck as if she had just won a lottery. The room erupted in an awkward, hesitant applause, a sound that grated on Victoria's ears like fingernails on a chalkboard. Some guests, caught in the crossfire of this emotional war, averted their gaze, their faces etched with discomfort. Others, however, stared openly, their smartphones raised, lenses glinting, eager to capture every agonizing detail of Victoria's unraveling. This wasn't just a private heartbreak. It was a spectacle, broadcast live to the digital world. Alexander, reveling in his moment, wasn't finished. His arm wrapped possessively around Cassandra's waist. He delivered the final, devastating blow. "I've already started divorce proceedings," he announced, his voice carrying an air of absolute finality. "Victoria will be taken care of financially, but Cassandra will be the new Mrs. Maxwell." At that precise moment, Elena, Victoria's closest friend, materialized at her side, her grip on Victoria's elbow firm, grounding. "We're leaving now," Elena whispered, her voice laced with fierce protectiveness. But before they could make their escape, Alexander approached, towering over Victoria, his face twisted into that smile she had once found charming, but now saw as a mask for utter malevolence. "I expect you out of the mansion by tomorrow," he commanded, his voice barely a whisper, yet vibrating with an insidious power. "The prenup clearly states, infidelity voids any claims to my properties." Victoria, stunned, finally found her voice, a shaky, disbelieving whisper. "Infidelity? I've never—" He leaned in closer, his words a venomous hiss meant only for her ears. "We both know that baby might not be mine. I've had my lawyers prepare documents questioning paternity. Sign the papers accepting minimal settlement, or I'll drag your name through every courtroom and tabloid in the country." The room spun. The glittering chandeliers blurred into a kaleidoscope of light and pain. The sheer depth of his betrayal, the calculated malice behind his actions, hit Victoria with the force of a physical blow. Not only was he abandoning her for another woman while she carried his child, but he planned to deny his own baby, to paint her as unfaithful, to strip her of her dignity and her future. 5 years of marriage, of shared dreams, of building an empire together, reduced to this calculated cruelty. Elena, her strength a lifeline, guided Victoria toward the exit, the whispers of the guests a buzzing, humiliating symphony in their wake. Her phone buzzed relentlessly in her purse, notifications piling up as videos of her public execution spread like wildfire across social media. Just before they reached the door, Alexander's voice cut through the din one last time. "Everyone, please stay and celebrate our engagement. The night is young, and Cassandra deserves the best party money can buy." In the sanctuary of Elena's car, the tears Victoria had so valiantly held back finally cascaded down her cheeks, hot and unstoppable. "He planned everything," she choked out, her voice raw with disbelief. "The business empire we built together, the baby we tried 3 years to conceive, none of it matters to him." Elena squeezed her hand, a silent promise of unwavering support. "This isn't the end, Victoria," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Men like Alexander think money equals power, but they've never faced a woman with nothing left to lose." Victoria placed her hand on her swollen belly, feeling her child move within her, a tiny flicker of life amidst the wreckage. Something inside her shifted. The crushing weight of grief began to yield, slowly, painstakingly, to a nascent, fierce determination. Alexander had no idea what he had just unleashed. He thought he had broken her. He was profoundly, catastrophically wrong. Let's pause for a moment and consider the psychology of what Alexander did. This wasn't merely a messy divorce. It was a theatrical act of dehumanization. Public humiliation, especially from someone who once claimed to love you, isn't just painful. It's designed to destroy your self-worth, to isolate you, and to strip you of your agency. For Victoria, a woman who had poured her intelligence and dedication into building Alexander's empire, who was carrying his child, this public spectacle was an attempt to erase her entirely. It's a classic tactic of control and dominance, often seen in high-power environments, where individuals equate power with absolute control over others' lives and reputations. The fact that he timed it with her pregnancy, weaponizing her most vulnerable state, speaks volumes about his character, or rather, his profound lack thereof. But what happens when someone tries to bury you, but forgets you're a seed? Victoria was about to embody that very metaphor. The tiny one-bedroom apartment, sparse and echoing, was a stark, brutal contrast to the opulent 30-room mansion Victoria had called home for 5 years. Cardboard boxes, overflowing with the scattered remnants of her life, sat stacked against bare walls, mute testaments to a past violently ripped away. The divorce had been swift, brutal, and meticulously orchestrated by Alexander's ruthless legal team. They had conjured fabricated evidence of her supposed affairs, a grotesque charade designed to back her into a corner. The threat was clear: accept a settlement far below what she deserved, or they would publicly expose these falsehoods, dragging her name through the mud of every tabloid and courtroom in the country. For Lily's sake, for the peace and future of her unborn child, Victoria signed the papers. It was a capitulation born not of defeat, but of profound maternal protection. The settlement, while a pittance by Maxwell standards, offered just enough to survive, to keep her head above water while she navigated the treacherous waters of her new reality. But the most significant, and perhaps ironically the most liberating clause, was Alexander's relinquishment of all parental rights to any child born of the marriage. His lawyers had phrased it with cold, clinical precision, unaware of the profound gift they were inadvertently bestowing upon Victoria. "He thinks he's punishing me," Victoria confided to Elena as they unpacked her few remaining possessions, a small pile of clothing and books that now constituted her entire material world. "But he's actually given me a gift. My child will never know his cruelty." It was a profound insight, a glimmer of light in the overwhelming darkness. Elena, ever practical, carefully positioned a small, wobbly table beneath the apartment's only window, a symbolic anchor in the storm. "Still, it's not fair," she lamented, her voice thick with indignation. "You helped build Maxwell Industries from the ground up. Your marketing strategy is what put them on the map." Victoria, now 8 months along, gently rubbed her swollen belly, a gesture of quiet strength. "Life isn't fair, Lena, but it isn't over either." It was a declaration, a silent vow to herself and to the tiny life within her. That night, alone in the unfamiliar stillness of her new home, Victoria pulled out her laptop. Alexander, in his myopic cruelty, had forced her to sign a non-compete agreement, effectively barring her from working in the same industry for 3 years. He believed he had crippled her, rendered her powerless. But he had fundamentally underestimated her intellect, her drive, and her formidable expertise. Victoria held a double major in finance and marketing, a prodigious talent who had been a rising star at her previous firm before Alexander had swept her off her feet at a business conference and convinced her to dedicate her brilliance to building his empire. She opened a new document, the cursor blinking expectantly on the blank screen. If she couldn't work in business directly, she would write about it instead. By morning, fueled by gallons of tea and an unyielding resolve, she had outlined a book, a powerful exposé detailing the cutthroat, often unethical tactics employed by corporations like Maxwell Industries. She would be meticulous, careful never to name names, weaving her insider knowledge into a narrative that would resonate deeply with those who knew the unspoken rules of the game. She would navigate the strict non-disclosure agreement with the precision of a surgeon, turning her perceived limitations into an unexpected advantage. 2 weeks later, the world outside her tiny apartment faded into insignificance as Victoria went into labor. With only Elena by her side, a steadfast anchor in the tumultuous waves of pain and anticipation, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, a tiny miracle she named Lily. As she held her daughter for the first time, Lily's miniature hand gripping her finger with astonishing strength, Victoria made a silent, sacred promise. Lily would have everything she needed, not through a billionaire's money, but through her mother's unwavering determination, her relentless pursuit of a life built on purpose and integrity. This wasn't about revenge. It was about survival, about legacy, about forging a new path where none seemed possible. The first months of Lily's life were a blur of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and a constant gnawing worry about the future. Victoria learned to write in stolen moments, when Lily finally succumbed to sleep, in the quiet pre-dawn hours, during precious fleeting naps. She transformed her raw, intimate knowledge of corporate manipulation, the hidden machinations of power and ambition, into compelling chapters. She lived frugally, meticulously stretching the meager settlement to its absolute limit, a constant reminder of the vulnerability she vowed to overcome. Every word she typed, every page she crafted, was a brick in the foundation of their new life, a silent act of defiance against the man who had tried to erase her. 6 months after Lily's birth, a call came that would change everything. Victoria's manuscript, The Glass Boardroom, was picked up by a publisher. Writing under the evocative pen name V.J. Knight, she detailed the invisible barriers, the subtle biases, and the systemic challenges women faced in male-dominated industries. The book, initially selling modestly, gained a quiet, organic momentum. Women in business, recognizing their own silent struggles, their own unspoken frustrations, in her powerful, authentic words, championed it. They passed it along, shared it, discussed it in hushed tones in corporate break rooms and at leadership conferences. By Lily's first birthday, Victoria had enough income from book sales and burgeoning speaking engagements to move them to a brighter, more spacious apartment, a tangible symbol of their upward trajectory. While society pages were still plastered with pictures of Alexander and Cassandra's lavish wedding, their opulent displays of wealth and their carefully curated public image, Victoria no longer felt the sting. Her focus had shifted. While they flaunted their superficial success, she was quietly, powerfully, building something infinitely more valuable: independence, self-worth, and a future entirely on her own terms. "You were right," Victoria told Elena, her voice filled with a quiet triumph, as they celebrated Lily's birthday with a small, homemade cake. "This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning." Elena smiled, watching Lily gleefully smash cake between her tiny fingers, her eyes twinkling. "And Alexander has no idea what's coming." This part of Victoria's journey is incredibly relatable for so many people who have faced devastating setbacks. Consider the countless individuals who, after losing a job, a relationship, or even their entire life savings, are forced to reinvent themselves. I remember hearing a story about a woman named Maria, a highly successful architect who, like Victoria, found herself suddenly divorced and financially vulnerable after her husband's lavish spending habits came to light. With 2 young children and no immediate job prospects in a tough economy, Maria felt like her world had ended. She initially took a low-paying job to make ends meet, but she spent every spare moment teaching herself new digital design skills, specifically in sustainable architecture, a niche her ex-husband had always dismissed as too idealistic. She started a small online blog, sharing her insights and designs, building a community. Slowly, clients started finding her, drawn by her passion and unique perspective. Within 5 years, Maria was not only running her own thriving sustainable architecture firm, but was also a recognized expert in her field, lecturing at universities and designing eco-friendly developments. Her success wasn't about getting back at her ex-husband. It was about discovering a deeper purpose and building a life authentically aligned with her values, a life that, in the end, far surpassed the one she had lost. This echo of Victoria's story, the pivot, the embrace of a new, authentic path, the quiet building of a new empire from the ashes of an old one, is a testament to the power of human resilience. 3 years passed in a whirlwind of change, each day a testament to Victoria's unwavering resolve. Her book, The Glass Boardroom, had transcended its initial modest sales to become a surprise international bestseller, translated into 20 languages. What had begun as a desperate necessity, a means to survive and protect her child, had blossomed into a flourishing, fulfilling career. She was no longer just a writer. She was a thought leader, with a successful series of business books that followed, each one solidifying her reputation as an authority on corporate strategy and female leadership. She became a highly sought-after speaker, her insights resonating deeply with audiences at women's leadership conferences worldwide. Lily, now a spirited 3-year-old, a vibrant reflection of her mother's determination and intelligence, thrived in preschool. Her laughter filled their new townhouse, purchased with Victoria's hard-earned income, a home that felt warm, vibrant, and full of possibility, a stark contrast to the cold, marble-clad halls of the Maxwell mansion, which had always lacked the fundamental ingredient of genuine joy. Victoria had not merely survived. She had created a stable, loving, and prosperous home, defying every expectation and starting from the absolute bottom. Then, one rainy afternoon, as Victoria sat at her desk, reviewing the proposal for her newest book, the phone rang. The caller ID displayed her publisher's number, a familiar comfort. "Victoria, have you seen the news?" Diane, her publisher, asked without preamble, her voice edged with an unusual urgency. "What news?" Victoria replied, her brow furrowing in mild confusion. "Maxwell Industries is tanking. Their stocks have dropped 60% in the last quarter. Rumors of bankruptcy are everywhere." Victoria slowly set down her pen, the unexpected news momentarily stunning her. She hadn't followed Alexander's business ventures since the divorce, deliberately erecting a mental firewall to shield herself from any information about him or his crumbling empire. "What happened?" she asked, surprised by the sudden surge of her own curiosity. "Poor decisions, mainly," Diane explained, her voice a rapid-fire download of corporate misfortune. "After you left, they launched that luxury tech line you had advised against. It flopped spectacularly. Then there was the merger that fell through, and now investors are jumping ship left and right." Victoria remembered the tech line with a pang of ironic recognition. She had spent months, countless hours, meticulously researching why it wouldn't resonate with their target demographic, crafting a detailed, comprehensive report warning against its launch. But Alexander, blinded by his own ambition and a stubborn desire to compete directly with tech giants like Apple, had dismissed her expert counsel, presumably after she was no longer there to articulate it. It was a classic case of hubris outweighing sound judgment. "There's more," Diane continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "The board is blaming Alexander's leadership directly. Word is he's been incredibly distracted by personal issues. His marriage to Cassandra is rumored to be failing, and he's rarely even in the office." After hanging up, Victoria sat motionless for a long time, absorbing the news. A strange quiet settled over her. Not joy, not schadenfreude, but a profound sense of closure. The empire they had meticulously built together was indeed crumbling, but not because she had wished it so. It was crumbling because the very arrogance, the same dismissive hubris that had led him to discard her, had also led him to discard sound business principles, expert advice, and ultimately, his own capacity for effective leadership. The chickens, it seemed, had come home to roost. That evening, as Victoria tucked Lily into bed, her daughter's innocent question, one Victoria had been dreading for years, finally came. "Mommy, Jenny at school has a daddy. Where's my daddy?" Victoria sat on the edge of Lily's small bed, her heart aching with a mixture of tenderness and trepidation. She chose her words with exquisite care, knowing that this conversation was merely the first of many. "Some families have a mommy and a daddy, sweetie. Some have two mommies or two daddies. And some, like us, have just a mommy. But all families are made of love, and we have so much love, don't we?" Lily nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer for now, her tiny face illuminated by the soft glow of her nightlight. Victoria knew, however, that harder, more complex questions would inevitably come as Lily grew older, questions she would have to navigate with honesty and compassion. Later that night, as Victoria wrestled with the weight of her recent conversation, an unexpected email appeared in her inbox. It was from her former assistant at Maxwell Industries, now a senior manager. The subject line alone made her heart pound. "Urgent, board meeting, follow-up." The email read, "The board is looking for new leadership. Your name came up. The non-compete expires next month. Would you consider meeting with them?" Victoria stared at the screen, a maelstrom of emotions swirling within her. The company she had poured her heart and soul into building, the very institution that had been weaponized against her, was now failing, and they wanted her back. The irony was a bitter yet undeniably powerful sensation. She closed her laptop without replying. This wasn't a decision to be made hastily, not after everything she had built. Whatever she chose, it would be on her terms this time. Let's talk for a moment about the concept of corporate karma. Alexander's downfall wasn't some random act of fate. It was the direct result of a pattern of behavior rooted in arrogance and a disregard for expertise. We often see this in the corporate world. Leaders who surround themselves with yes men or who consistently dismiss dissenting opinions, particularly from talented women. Think of the stories of companies that soared under visionary leadership, only to crash and burn when ego replaced strategy. A prime example is the story of Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. While the specifics of fraud are different, the underlying theme of a leader prioritizing their own vision and hubris over sound scientific and business principles led to a spectacular downfall. Similarly, Alexander's inability to recognize and value Victoria's strategic brilliance, not just as his wife but as a business partner, directly contributed to Maxwell Industries' decline. It's a powerful lesson in the long-term consequences of character flaws in leadership. The universe, it seems, has a way of balancing the scales, not necessarily through revenge, but through the natural unraveling of unsustainable ego-driven structures. Victoria adjusted her blazer, the familiar fabric a comforting weight against her shoulders, as the elevator silently climbed to the top floor of Maxwell Tower. 5 years ago, she had been unceremoniously forced out of this very building, her world in ruins, tears blurring her vision. Now she was returning, not as Alexander Maxwell's discarded wife, but as a potential CEO candidate, a woman who had forged her own formidable path. After 2 weeks of intense consideration, soul-searching conversations with Elena, and lengthy discussions with her lawyers, Victoria had agreed to meet with the board. She held no intention of immediately accepting any position, but a powerful, almost magnetic curiosity compelled her to hear them out. Maxwell Industries, despite everything, had once been her passion, a testament to her intelligence and drive. And deep down, she still believed in the company's inherent potential, a potential that had been squandered by short-sighted leadership. The boardroom was exactly as she remembered it, the sweeping wall-to-wall windows offering a breathtaking panorama of the city, the massive oak table gleaming under the recessed lighting, a silent witness to countless high-stakes decisions. 8 board members rose as she entered, their faces a complex tapestry of desperation, hope, and an undeniable deference. "Miss Knight," the chairman greeted her, using her established pen name, a subtle acknowledgement of her independent success. "Thank you for coming." For the next 2 hours, they laid bare the company's troubles, the catastrophic failure of product lines she had warned against, the glaring leadership vacuum, the relentless plummeting of stock prices. They admitted, without explicitly stating it, that their decision to remove Victoria from the company, or rather, to allow Alexander to force her out, had been a catastrophic, unforgivable mistake. Their proposed solution was clear, almost pleading: bring her back as CEO, with Alexander stepping down to a figurehead role as chairman emeritus, a gilded cage designed to contain his lingering influence. "Where is Alexander today?" Victoria asked when they finally finished their elaborate pitch, her voice calm and level. Uncomfortable glances circled the polished table before the chairman responded, his tone carefully neutral. "Mr. Maxwell is taking some personal time. His divorce from Cassandra has been rather public." So, the rumors were true. Alexander's second marriage had collapsed as spectacularly as his business decisions, a bitter echo of his first. "I'll need time to consider your offer," Victoria said, rising gracefully from her seat. "And I'd want complete autonomy if I were to return. No interference from former leadership." As she exited the boardroom, her thoughts already racing through the implications of such a monumental decision, she nearly collided with a man entering from the adjacent hallway. She froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. Standing directly in front of her, for the first time in 5 years, was Alexander. He looked older, significantly so. The confident swagger that had once defined him was gone, replaced by stooped shoulders and tired, haunted eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke, the shock of their unexpected encounter rendering them both speechless. "Victoria," he finally managed, her name sounding strange, almost foreign, on his lips after so long. "They told me you were meeting with the board." Victoria simply nodded, maintaining her composure with an iron will, though her heart continued its frantic rhythm. Alexander glanced around the bustling hallway, then gestured toward his office. "Could we talk privately?" Against her better judgment, a flicker of curiosity outweighing her ingrained caution, Victoria followed him. The office, once a shrine to his success, adorned with awards and expensive art, now looked stark, almost barren. Several empty shelves clearly suggested that Cassandra, in her hasty departure, had already claimed her share of possessions. "I heard about your books," Alexander said, closing the door. the click echoing in the suddenly silent room. "Congratulations." "Thank you." An awkward, palpable silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken history, until Alexander broke it with words Victoria never expected to hear. "You were right about everything. The tech line, the Asian expansion, all of it. I should have listened." Victoria studied him, searching for the familiar glint of manipulation, the subtle shift in his eyes that would betray a hidden agenda. But she found only defeat, a raw, undeniable weariness in his expression. "It wasn't about being right," she said finally, her voice softer than she intended. "It was about being partners, something you forgot when it became inconvenient." Alexander sank into his chair, suddenly looking every bit his 45 years, the weight of his failures visibly pressing down on him. "Cassandra left me for a younger venture capitalist," he confessed, a bitter, hollow laugh escaping him. "Ironic, isn't it? History repeating itself." Victoria felt no satisfaction at his misery, only a detached observation of the cosmic justice at play. "Life has a way of teaching lessons we refuse to learn willingly," she mused softly. "And your daughter?" he asked hesitantly, his eyes flicking up to meet hers. "I've seen pictures in the business magazines when they profile you. She looks happy." "Lily is wonderful," Victoria said, her voice softening instinctively at the thought of her child. "Smart, kind, curious about everything." "Does she know about me?" Alexander asked, his voice barely a whisper. Victoria shook her head. "She knows her father isn't in our lives. That's all for now." Alexander nodded slowly, accepting this without argument, a rare display of humility. As Victoria turned to leave, he spoke again, his voice catching slightly. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not that it changes anything." Victoria paused at the door, her hand on the cool metal handle. "You're right. It doesn't change the past. But what matters now is what we do next." She left him there, amidst the remnants of his crumbling empire, and took the elevator down to the street where her driver waited. The board's offer, with all its complex implications, weighed heavily on her mind as the car pulled away from Maxwell Tower. This scene with Alexander is pivotal. It's not about Victoria getting an apology. It's about Alexander finally facing the consequences of his actions and perhaps for the first time acknowledging his own mistakes without deflection. This kind of interaction, where a former oppressor finally admits their fault, is incredibly rare in real life, especially in high-stakes corporate environments. Often, people caught in such power struggles carry their grievances for years, sometimes decades. But for Victoria, this moment offered a different kind of release. It wasn't about him. It was about her own journey. Her response, "It doesn't change the past. But what matters now is what we do next," is a profound statement of self-empowerment and forward momentum. It encapsulates the idea that true healing isn't about rewriting history, but about consciously choosing your future, unburdened by past hurts. It's a testament to the fact that Victoria has truly moved on, transforming her pain into purpose, and is no longer defined by Alexander's narrative. Victoria spent the next week meticulously weighing the board's astonishing offer. On paper, it was everything she could possibly want: full, unchallenged control of Maxwell Industries, a compensation package that dwarfed even her already successful writing career, and the undeniably sweet vindication of returning to lead the very company her ex-husband had forced her to leave in disgrace. The narrative of triumph was irresistible, a powerful allure, yet accepting it meant uprooting the peaceful, stable life she had meticulously built with Lily. It meant a return to long hours, immense pressure, and an inevitable, however diminished, form of interaction with Alexander. Could she truly navigate that landscape without the bitterness creeping back in? Could she protect Lily from the complexities of her past? "What does your gut tell you?" Elena asked over coffee in Victoria's sunny kitchen, Lily's joyful shouts echoing from the backyard as she played. Victoria watched her daughter through the window, her heart swelling with an almost overwhelming love. "That's the problem. My gut is conflicted. Part of me wants to prove I can save the company. Another part feels like that chapter of my life is closed." "And what about Alexander? Can you really work in the same building as him?" Victoria sighed, the internal debate exhausting her. "He's not the same man who humiliated me 5 years ago. He seems broken. Seeing him like that, I realized something unexpected. I've moved on. Truly moved on. The anger isn't there anymore, just a kind of quiet sadness for what could have been. The very next day, an email arrived that complicated her decision further, introducing a new, urgent dimension to her moral dilemma. A rival company was aggressively preparing a hostile takeover of Maxwell Industries. If successful, their plan was ruthless. Strip the company for its most valuable assets, sell off its various divisions, and lay off the vast majority of its 5,000 employees. Victoria's heart sank. She had helped hire many of those people during her years with the company. She knew their faces, their stories. She had attended their weddings, their baby showers, shared in their triumphs and their struggles. The thought of them losing their livelihoods, their sense of security, all because of Alexander's mismanagement and her forced absence, weighed heavily on her conscience. It was no longer just about personal vindication. It was about responsibility. That evening, as Victoria tucked Lily into bed, her daughter asked a question that caught her entirely by surprise, a moment of startling clarity and innocent wisdom. "Mommy, are you going to work at the big building with your name on it?" Victoria blinked in confusion. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Lily yawned, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant, her eyes already heavy with sleep. "I heard you talking to Aunt Elena. She said, 'The company has your real name on it, Maxwell, like my last name.'" Victoria had never hidden her past from Lily, but she had always kept the details age-appropriate. Lily knew her mother had once been married to her father, and that they had built a company together before they separated. "I'm thinking about it," Victoria admitted, her voice soft. "But it would mean big changes for us. I'd be very busy and we might need help around the house." Lily considered this solemnly, her small brow furrowed in thought. "Would you still read me stories at night?" "Always," Victoria promised, her voice firm with conviction, "no matter what job I take." "Then I think you should help the people at the building with our name on it," Lily said, her childish logic cutting through the complex adult dilemmas with simple, irrefutable clarity. "You always say helping others is important." The next morning, Victoria called the board chairman. Her decision was made, infused with a newfound clarity, purpose, and a profound sense of responsibility. "I'll take the position," she stated, her voice resonating with authority. But this wasn't just about a job. It was about redefining leadership, reshaping a corporate culture, and building a legacy of genuine impact. She outlined her terms, non-negotiable and visionary. Alexander would move to a strictly advisory role, completely stripped of any direct authority. She would implement a comprehensive employee share program, giving every single employee a tangible ownership stake in the company's future. And most importantly, the company would establish the New Beginnings Foundation, an initiative dedicated to supporting single parents in business, funded by a generous 1% of annual profits. To her genuine surprise, the board, desperate and recognizing the brilliance of her proposals, agreed to everything. By that afternoon, business news channels around the globe were reporting the stunning appointment of Victoria Knight Maxwell as the new CEO of Maxwell Industries. The stock price, a barometer of market confidence, jumped an astonishing 15% on the announcement alone. As Victoria prepared for her first day back at Maxwell Tower, a profound sense of reflection washed over her, a quiet acknowledgement of the arduous journey that had brought her to this precipice of power and purpose. 5 years ago, she had stood in a grand ballroom, watching her husband propose to another woman, convinced her life was utterly over. Now, she was returning not as a victim, but as a leader, tempered by fire, stronger for every challenge she had overcome, ready to write a new chapter, not just for herself, but for thousands of employees and countless future families. Lily's innocent yet profound statement, "You always say helping others is important," is a perfect example of how children often cut through the noise of adult complexities with simple, undeniable truths. This concept of using one's position not just for personal gain, but for the greater good, is a cornerstone of ethical leadership. We see this in modern business leaders who champion social responsibility and employee welfare, understanding that a company's success is deeply intertwined with the well-being of its people and the community it serves. Think of companies like Patagonia, famous for its environmental activism and fair labor practices, or even smaller local businesses that invest heavily in their employees and community development. These aren't just feel-good initiatives. They're smart business strategies that foster loyalty, enhance reputation, and ultimately contribute to sustainable, long-term success. Victoria's decision to implement an employee share program and establish the New Beginnings Foundation wasn't just about charity. It was about building a resilient, ethical, and human-centric corporate culture, a far cry from the cutthroat, ego-driven environment Alexander had fostered. Her takeover was not hostile but transformative, a powerful example of leadership driven by empathy and a vision for collective prosperity. 1 year later, the scene was transformed, almost miraculously. Victoria stood at the podium in the very same grand ballroom where Alexander had once humiliated her, but the space was now unrecognizable. Banners bearing the new company logo, still Maxwell Industries, but reimagined, revitalized, and redefined under her visionary leadership, hung proudly from the soaring ceilings. The crystal chandeliers, once instruments of mockery, now sparkled above 300 employees and their families, gathered to celebrate the company's remarkable, almost unbelievable turnaround. When I returned to Maxwell Industries, Victoria addressed the jubilant crowd, her voice strong and clear. Many called it a revenge story, the discarded wife returning to save the company her ex-husband nearly destroyed. But this past year has taught me something important. True success isn't about revenge. It's about resilience. It's about vision. It's about building a future better than the past. In just 12 months, Victoria had executed a brilliant strategic restructuring plan. The company had refocused with surgical precision on its core strengths, ruthlessly abandoning the failing ventures Alexander had stubbornly championed. She had embraced innovations she had advocated for years prior, ideas that had once been dismissed, now blossoming under her careful guidance. The results were staggering. Profits had doubled, the hostile takeover had been decisively defeated, and most importantly, not a single employee had lost their job during the tumultuous transition. From her front row seat, Lily, now a radiant 6-year-old, beamed at her mother, understanding more and more about her family's unusual, triumphant history. Beside her sat Elena, now the proud and passionate director of the New Beginnings Foundation, her eyes filled with pride. And at the end of the row, looking somewhat uncomfortable but undeniably present, was Alexander. His new role as an advisor, stripped of direct authority, had proven surprisingly valuable. Once his towering ego was removed from the decision-making process, his deep industry knowledge and extensive network of connections had, ironically, helped smooth Victoria's path forward. Their professional relationship remained strictly formal, a cautious dance of mutual respect, but the bitter sting of the past had faded, replaced by a quiet, almost fragile understanding. Today marks not just our company's rebirth, Victoria continued, her gaze sweeping across the room, but the official launch of the New Beginnings Foundation. Her voice swelled with purpose. This initiative will provide grants, mentorship, and crucial child care assistance to single parents building careers and businesses, helping them navigate the challenges I once faced. I'm proud to announce our first year's funding will help over 500 families across the country. Applause thundered through the ballroom, a wave of genuine emotion and celebration. Victoria caught Alexander's eye as he joined the ovation, a silent acknowledgement of the profound irony between them. The foundation, born from the ashes of their failed marriage, a direct consequence of his past cruelty, would now help others avoid similar struggles, offering hope and opportunity where she had once found despair. After the ceremony, as employees and their families mingled, enjoying the vibrant celebration, Alexander approached Victoria beside the refreshment table. "Congratulations," he said, his voice sincere, devoid of any pretense or bitterness. "You've accomplished more in 1 year than I did in 5. Victoria accepted the compliment with a gracious nod. "It wasn't just me, Alexander. This company has always had good people. They just needed the right direction." An awkward pause followed, laden with unspoken history, before Alexander spoke again. "The board approved my reassignment request. I'll be heading the European division starting next month. I know it's a good move for everyone." Alexander glanced across the room, his gaze landing on Lily, who was charming a group of executives with her precocious questions about the business, a tiny, budding entrepreneur in the making. "She has your intelligence and your determination," he observed, a hint of admiration in his voice. "She does," Victoria agreed, watching her daughter with a heart full of pride. "Before I leave," Alexander said hesitantly, his gaze returning to Victoria, "I wanted to ask, would it be possible for me to meet her properly someday? Not as her father necessarily, just so she knows who I am when she's older and asks questions." Victoria considered his request. The deep hurt he'd caused had over time healed, leaving room for cautious forgiveness, a space free from the corrosive power of bitterness. "That's Lily's decision to make when she's older," Victoria replied, setting a firm, compassionate boundary. "I won't stand in the way if she wants to know you, but I won't push it either." Alexander accepted this with a grateful nod. "That's more than I deserve." As he walked away, a final piece of Victoria's past seemed to settle into place, a weight lifted, a chapter closed. 6 years ago, in this very room, she had believed her life was ending. Instead, it had been just the beginning of a journey that made her stronger, more purposeful, and more deeply fulfilled than she had ever imagined possible. Later that evening, Victoria and Lily returned not to their townhouse, but to a new house, a home with a sprawling garden where Lily could play under the watchful eyes of fireflies, and a dedicated office where Victoria could write whenever inspiration struck. Despite her demanding role as CEO, she had steadfastly maintained her writing career, publishing a new book about authentic leadership that had quickly become required reading in business schools across the nation. As they settled onto the porch swing, watching the last vestiges of twilight paint the sky with hues of lavender and gold, Lily asked, her voice soft and wondering, "Are you happy, Mommy?" Victoria hugged her daughter close, pondering the question. Was she happy? Her life hadn't followed the neat, predictable path she'd once envisioned. The fairy tale marriage had crumbled into dust, but from its ashes, she had built something infinitely more real, more lasting. A successful career on her own terms, a powerful foundation helping others find their strength, and most importantly, a loving, secure home for her daughter. "Yes, Lily," Victoria answered honestly, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm very happy. We've built a good life together, haven't we?" Lily nodded sagely, her head nestled against her mother's chest. "The best life." Victoria smiled, thinking of the frightened, heartbroken woman who had fled that ballroom 6 years ago. If she could somehow send a message back through time, whisper advice across the chasm of years, she would tell that woman just 3 simple words. "You'll be okay." But now she knew the truth. Better than okay. As the first stars emerged overhead, glittering like scattered diamonds, and her daughter's weight grew heavy against her side, Victoria knew, with a certainty that permeated her very being, that she had truly gotten the last laugh. Not through bitterness or vengeful schemes, but by creating a life so rich with purpose, so abundant with love, and so overflowing with joy that no one, absolutely no one, could ever take it away. The ultimate lesson here is profound. Victoria's journey is a powerful testament to the fact that true victory isn't about getting revenge, or even about proving your worth to those who doubted you. It's about resilience, about redefining success on your own terms, and about transforming pain into purpose. Her last laugh wasn't Alexander's downfall, nor was it her return to power. It was the quiet, undeniable peace and happiness she built for herself and Lily, the ability to turn her most devastating setback into her greatest triumph. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest act of defiance against those who try to diminish you is simply to thrive, to flourish, and to live a life so authentically joyful and meaningful that their opinion, their judgment, and their past actions simply cease to matter. Your story isn't over until you say it's over, and you hold the pen. What will you write next?